sacrifices of those military men and women who've laid down their lives in service to this nation. Memorial Day means a lot to a lot of different people. Our president, John Kennedy, said one time that it is not the heroes that a country produces. What is important is those heroes that are remembered. Today we remembered those who fell in service. I'd like to take a moment and acknowledge anyone who's lost a loved one in duty to this country. It doesn't matter how much time has passed. No words of condolence can even begin to adequately console the survivor's grief. And while grief from loss may change over time, it never leaves us. In World War II, as mentioned earlier, families that lost loved ones to the war displayed a gold star for each member lost. We had a gold star father today. Some mothers actually became 4 gold star mothers. Remember the sacrifices that were displayed in the movie Saving Private Ryan. 5 sons, 4 given for our freedom. On every last Monday in May, we find ourselves reflecting on these men and women who so bravely risked limb and life in the face of grave danger. We remember those who left the comforts of home to fight for us and our freedom, but never returned to be able to trade the title of soldier, sailor, airman, Coast Guardsman, or Marine, to trade that title for veteran. They never came back. We mourned our brothers and sisters in arms the day they left us, and we mourn now. The men and women who have given their lives in service to our country are indisputably heroes. When their country called, they answered. Now, some volunteered, and some were voluntold. But no matter how they found their way into the ranks of the military, each took upon himself or herself to serve faithfully to their fullest. Now, this is commendable in a nation where so few among our citizens have donned the uniform and accepted the inherent risks. And this alone makes them heroes worthy of remembrance. These individuals, and so many like them, live on as some of the most courageous heroes in history. Those in the military and veterans communities know that we must ensure that these individuals are never forgotten and that their actions stay alive in our memories. But for most veterans, it is the men and women that we served alongside through their sacrifice and service for others that shall live on as heroes in our hearts. While few received the nation's highest honor, many gave their lives in uniform, and many more were taken from us as a result of injuries or illness contracted in service. People like 21-year-old Marine Lance Corporal Joshua Bernard, who was killed in action in August 2009 of Afghanistan's Helmand province when he was hit by a Taliban rocket-propelled grenade. Or the mother of 3, Army Specialist Katrina Bell Johnson, who was killed in February 2005 in a vehicle accident in Iraq. Or Army First Lieutenant Sharon Ann Lane, who died from shrapnel wounds in 1969 when the 312th Evacuation Hospital in Vietnam was hit by rockets. There's also individuals like Coast Guard signalman First Class Douglas Monroe, who during the Battle of Guadalcanal in 1942 volunteered to evacuate a detachment of Marines facing annihilation by enemy forces. Monroe maneuvered himself to shield in his boat the Marines as they loaded onto the boats, exposing himself to enemy fire and sustaining fatal wounds. Monroe is the only member of the Coast Guard to have received the Medal of Honor. Or Army Corporal Melvin Randall Hill, who at 19 was killed in the Battle of the Chosin Reservoir in Korea, December 1950. Some of our veterans, we are unable to pay our respects at a final resting place. There are still more than 82,000 military personnel missing in action from every conflict since World War II. We will never forget them, and we will never stop looking for them. This past August, about 10 months ago, the ill-fated USS Indianapolis was finally discovered more than 70 years after being torpedoed by a Japanese submarine. On July 30th, 1945, the ship sunk in just 12 minutes. Of the 1,195 crew aboard, approximately 300 went down with the cruiser, leaving 800. The remaining sailors and Marines faced exposure, dehydration, saltwater poisoning, delirium, and shark attacks while floating in the Philippine Sea with very few lifeboats. The Navy didn't learn of the sinking until survivors were spotted 4 days later by a flight crew on a routine patrol. And of the 800, there were only 316 survivors. The families of those lost on board the USS Indianapolis received a small sense of closure that year. But they're still part of a club that no one asks to join, while service members and their families understand and accept the risks they take by volunteering to serve our great nation. Nothing can fully prepare a survivor for that knock on the door. It isn't just war at sea, in the air, or on boots on the ground thousands of miles away where we've lost service members. I think it is important to understand that the profession of arms is a dangerous job. Just this last year, 3 aviation crashes in 3 different states resulted in 7 fatalities, 4 Marines, 2 soldiers, and an Air Force Thunderbomb pilot. Now, I know that each of you understands that this is more than a passing news headline involving military personnel. This is a tragic loss of life, and we honor the lives cut short. Those of us here today understand that to recognize their service and sacrifice, we must ensure that these individuals are never forgotten, and that their actions stay alive in our hearts and in our memories. This is important for honoring the heroes of today and the veterans of years gone by who paved the way for them. There is a nationwide campaign underway to recognize veterans in conjunction with the 50th anniversary of the Vietnam War. A long time ago. But there are nearly 60,000 people who will never receive that token of appreciation or that genuine thanks. As of Memorial Day last year, there were 58,318 names that line the Vietnam Wall in Washington, which remains a striking visual cost of that war. 2 of those names on the wall were friends of mine, Ken Atkins and Paul Benkert, who met separate fates, but they gave their life in defense of our country. On the wall, one of those names belongs to Lieutenant Colonel Ann Ruth Graham, who served in the Army in World War II, Korea, and is the chief nurse at the 91st Evacuation Hospital in Vietnam. She was 52 years old when she died after being evacuated to Japan, and died buried with full military honors at Arlington National Cemetery. Private First Class James Anderson, on the wall, became the first African-American U.S. Marine recipient of the Medal of Honor in 1967. He received the honor posthumously after intentionally grabbing a grenade and absorbing the blast in order to save his comrades. No love is greater than a man who would lay down his life for another. Another name on the wall is Sergeant Robert G. Deviese. He joined the Marine Corps, and I don't know how he did this, but it says at age 14. Must have been a big guy. Yeah. Had 4 years of service, 4 years in the service in the military when he was shipped off to Vietnam. He was killed in action December 17th, 1966, 1 day before his 19th birthday. Brothers David and Norman Evans were both killed in Vietnam. David was 19 years old when he died on October 24th, 1968. And Norman passed away just over 2 years later on November 24th, 1970, at age 23. The brothers, who both served in the Army, died in separate helicopter crashes. Norman Evans' body was never recovered. Of the million-plus men and women who have died in America's military service, the vast majority are everyday heroes. They are brothers and sisters who fought alongside of us, who have left unfillable holes in families, communities, and hearts across this community. Their friendships, their bravery, and their commitment to duty will never be lost. John F. Kennedy, as I quoted earlier, a Navy veteran of World War II and Purple Heart recipient, also said, "As we express our gratitude, we must never forget that the highest appreciation is not to utter words, but to live by them." The 35th President of the United States charged us to take our appreciation a step further. There is no more relevant time to embrace this quote than on Memorial Day. I would ask you, as you leave here and go about the rest of your day, to keep the fallen in your minds and the families and friends in your heart, for it is their immense collective sacrifices that have helped keep our country safe and free. And as long as we continue to honor them with our actions and remember their sacrifices, they will never be forgotten. Thank you, and may God bless and keep our fallen, our veterans and active military, and the United States of America.